Leo wasn't there when our son was born. His excuse, sent via text, was that the hockey game had gone into a sudden death shootout. His sister later remarked, "Some people are just so theatrical about giving birth." I held our baby in my arms, completely alone, until a nurse quietly entered the room, holding a small, ornate, locked box. "Someone instructed me to give this to you," she said, "but only if he didn't make it." The little plastic stick was shaking in my grip, a tremor that matched the frantic, hummingbird beat of my heart. Two bright pink lines, impossible to misread, stared up at me. My pulse was a drum against my ribs, and I instinctively laid a hand on my stomach, which was still perfectly flat. I tried to imagine the little spark of life, a secret universe beginning to form inside me. This was the moment, the one I had rehearsed in my head since I was a little girl, arranging my dolls into a perfect family. I practically flew out of the bathroom, the test clutched in my hand like a golden ticket. "Leo!" I called out, my voice thick with emotion and excitement. "Leo, you have to come here. You need to see this." He glanced up from his phone, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes at being disturbed. His gaze went from me to the test, and then immediately back to the glowing screen in his hands. "Okay," he said, with all the emotion of someone telling me the trash had been taken out. That's something." Something? The entire foundation of my world had just fractured and reformed, and all he could muster was something? Before we dive deeper into this, I just want to say thank you for being here and listening to these stories that need to be told. If you agree that every person deserves to be supported and cherished during life's most defining moments, I'd be so grateful if you'd consider subscribing to the channel. It costs nothing, and it helps us connect with more people who might be feeling just as alone. Now, let's get back to this incredible story. The silence that stretched between us in that moment was chilling, a frost creeping into the warmth that had filled my heart just seconds before I stood there, waiting. I waited for him to leap from the couch, to lift me up and spin me around, to grab his phone and excitedly call his parents. Instead, he just kept scrolling, his thumb flicking across the screen, completely absorbed in a world that was clearly more captivating than this one. The balloon of pure joy that had been inflating in my chest started to leak, a slow, painful deflation. Aren't you excited?" I finally whispered, the words barely audible over the sound of my own disappointment. "Sure, babe," he mumbled, his eyes still glued to his phone. "Just processing." He didn't even look at me. That night, I lay awake in the dark, the space between us and the bed feeling like a vast, cold canyon. I started mentally planning how we'd announce it. Maybe a cute picture with a tiny pair of sneakers between our own, or perhaps a little cake reveal with the words "coming soon" elegantly piped in blue and pink icing. I could already hear the happy squeals from our family and friends, feel the congratulatory hugs, and see the calendar filling up with plans for baby showers and debates over nursery themes. Sleep eventually came, but it was shallow and restless, a landscape of fragmented dreams filled with the ghost of tiny hands and the echo of first steps. The day of our first doctor's appointment felt like Christmas morning to me. I'd booked the day off work months in advance, purchased a beautiful leather-bound journal to meticulously record every detail, every piece of advice from the doctor. I even packed a bag of snacks for Leo because I knew how irritable he got when he was hungry. He never made it. I sat in that sterile white waiting room, a solitary island in a sea of radiant couples, holding hands and whispering excitedly to each other. My phone kept buzzing with his litany of excuses. "An emergency meeting just came up. You'll be fine. Just get the basic info." When the nurse finally called my name, "Clara?" I walked into that examination room feeling utterly alone. Dr. Evans was warm and kind, her smile genuine as she squeezed the cold gel onto my belly, but I saw her eyes keep flicking to the empty, expectant chair beside me. "Where's Dad today?" she asked, her voice gentle. "A work emergency," I lied, and the words felt like ash in my mouth. And then it happened. A sound filled the room, a rapid, powerful, thrumming beat. It was the sound of my baby's heart, strong and determined. I stared at the grainy black and white image on the monitor, trying to decipher a nose or a tiny set of fingers from the abstract shapes, and I felt hot tears begin to stream down my face. This was supposed to be our moment, a memory we would cherish forever. Instead, I was sharing it with a kind stranger who passed me a box of tissues and politely pretended not to notice the wedding ring on my finger. That evening, with my hands still shaking, I tried to show Leo the ultrasound photos. He glanced at them for no more than a few seconds before placing them on the kitchen counter, right next to a pile of junk mail and a grocery store flyer. "Cool," he said. "Looks like a little peanut." A peanut. My baby, our baby, was a peanut. The second appointment was a carbon copy of the first, and so was the third. With each missed appointment, Leo's excuses grew more elaborate. A crucial client presentation. His boss called a last-minute team meeting. The traffic was an absolute nightmare. Eventually, I just stopped asking him to come. The weight of the constant disappointment was becoming too much to bear. Family dinners became a masterclass in survival. Every Sunday, I'd find myself at his sister Miranda's oversized dining table, my hand unconsciously drifting to my swelling belly, a silent plea for someone, anyone, to notice, to ask how I was, to show even a flicker of excitement. Instead, all I got were stares. Miranda's sharp eyes would narrow whenever she looked at me, as if I were a particularly frustrating puzzle she couldn't solve. Her friend, Chloe, would whisper something in her ear, and they would both shoot glances my way, their faces etched with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Was it pity, disgust, or just plain disapproval? "You look exhausted, Clara," Miranda said one evening, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet, false concern. "Are you really taking care of yourself?" "I'm fine," I managed, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. "Just the usual pregnancy stuff." "Pregnancy stuff," she repeated the words, as if she were tasting something sour. "You know, some people just aren't built for motherhood. It's really nothing to be ashamed of." The words didn't just sting. They landed like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. Across the table, Chloe nodded with a sage, self-satisfied expression, her mouth a thin, tight line of agreement. "I think I'll be a good mother," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Miranda leaned forward, her perfectly manicured nails drumming a sharp rhythm on the expensive tablecloth. "Sweetie, let's be honest. You can barely manage your own life. You called in sick 3 times last month. You cried during car insurance commercials. Are you absolutely certain this baby is a good idea?" The entire room plunged into silence. The only sound, the heavy, ominous ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. And Leo? Leo said nothing. He didn't defend me. He didn't tell his sister to back off. He just meticulously cut into his steak, chewing slowly as if this entire conversation was happening on a different planet. I excused myself to the bathroom and sobbed until my eyes were swollen and puffy. When I finally emerged, they had moved on, cheerfully discussing vacation plans for the following summer, plans that clearly had no room for the logistics of a newborn. The most painful part of it all was watching Leo with his other sister, Sarah's children. Every weekend he would transform. He'd show up at her house, his arms full of gifts and treats, his entire face lighting up the moment his niece and nephew would come running to greet him. He'd spend hours patiently teaching them to throw a baseball, helping with their homework, and building a magnificent pillow fort that took over the entire living room. "Uncle Leo is the best." 7-year-old Mason would shriek, launching himself into Leo's embrace. I'd watch from the kitchen window as Leo lifted the boy high into the air, the sound of their shared, uninhibited laughter echoing through the yard. That tenderness, that bottomless patience in his voice. Where was all of that energy when I asked if we could maybe start looking at cribs? "We have plenty of time," he'd say, a familiar edge of irritation in his voice. Don't be so pushy about it, Clara, as if preparing for the arrival of our own child was some kind of unreasonable demand. Sarah's house was a loving shrine to her children. Photographs adorned every wall, crayon masterpieces covered the refrigerator, and toys were scattered across every surface, evidence of a life lived fully. Our house, by contrast, remained sterile and unchanged, as if my pregnancy was a temporary condition, something happening to someone else, somewhere far away. But it was my own mother's reaction that cut the deepest. I had always imagined she would be over the moon about becoming a grandmother, that she'd immediately start knitting tiny booties and planning a huge family celebration. Instead, she treated my pregnancy like an inconvenient phase I was going through, something to be politely tolerated. "Mom, want to feel the baby kick?" I asked, hopefully during one of our weekly coffee dates, gently placing her hand on my round belly. She flinched and pulled her hand away as if my skin were hot to the touch. "That's all right, dear," she said. "I'm sure it's nice." Nice. The first tangible movements of my child were simply nice. Whenever I tried to bring up potential baby names, she would suddenly recall an urgent detail about her book club or a piece of gossip about the neighbors. When I confessed I was terrified of labor, she just waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, you're being dramatic, as usual. Women have been having babies for millennia. You'll figure it out." Dramatic. That word became my shadow, an invisible brand that made me second-guess every single emotion I felt, every valid concern, every fleeting moment of joy I dared to experience. The isolation became a physical thing, suffocating me. I would scroll endlessly through my social media feeds, watching montages of other pregnant women surrounded by beaming, supportive families, attending lavish baby showers with partners who looked genuinely ecstatic. The stark contrast made my chest ache with a loneliness so profound it felt like I was slowly drowning. And then there was Maya. She didn't make grand, sweeping gestures or offer a flood of unsolicited advice. She just showed up. The day I texted her that I had another ultrasound, she quietly took the afternoon off work without me even having to ask. When a brutal bout of morning sickness left me unable to keep down anything but saltine crackers, she appeared at my doorstep with a thermos of homemade chicken soup and a bag of ginger tea. "You don't have to do all this," I told her one afternoon, my voice thick with unshed tears, as she sat on my living room floor patiently folding the tiny bodysuits I had secretly bought. "I know," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I want to." She was the only person who asked me how I was feeling and then actually waited for the answer. She was the only one who touched my belly with a sense of reverence, not obligation. She was the only one who seemed to understand that this pregnancy wasn't just about a baby. It was about me, becoming a mother, scared and thrilled and in desperate need of someone in my corner. Those quiet, unassuming afternoons with Maya became my lifeline, the only tangible proof that my joy, my experience, my transformation, that any of it mattered to anyone. While everyone else seemed to be wishing my pregnancy away, she helped me embrace it, one gentle, validating gesture at a time. The first real pain hit me at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. It was a sharp, searing bolt that ripped through my lower back like lightning, splitting a tree I had been lying in bed, one hand resting protectively on my swollen belly, listening to the sound of Leo's steady, even breathing beside me. The contraction lasted for 30 seconds. I counted each one before it finally released its grip, leaving me breathless and gasping. "Leo," I whispered, shaking his shoulder gently, I think it's starting." He just mumbled something incoherent and rolled over, turning his back to me. The second contraction arrived 12 minutes later, and it was stronger, a crushing force that wrapped around my entire midsection like a tightening iron band. I gripped the bedsheets, my knuckles turning white, and tried to breathe through it, just like they taught in those prenatal classes I had attended all by myself. By 1:15 a.m., they were coming every 8 minutes. I sat on the edge of our bed, my hands trembling as I timed each new wave. With the stopwatch on my phone, I finally had to accept what was happening. This was real. This was it. After 9 long months of being ignored, dismissed, and quietly wished away, my baby was finally ready to make his grand entrance, Leo. I said, much louder this time, my voice cracking with a mixture of pain and urgency. The contractions are regular. We need to go to the hospital now. He cracked one eye open, squinting at me in the dim light. Are you sure? First babies usually take forever. Can't this wait until the morning? Before I could even form a response, another contraction seized me, forcing me to my feet. I started swaying back and forth, a primal rhythm that seemed to be the only thing that offered any relief. When it finally passed, I was crying. I'm sure, I whispered. Please. He let out a long, dramatic sigh, the sound of a man being asked to perform the most egregious and unreasonable task imaginable. Fine, he grumbled. Let me get dressed. While he moved with all the urgency of someone heading to a routine dental cleaning, I started going down the list of numbers I had so carefully programmed into my phone months ago. My family. His family. The people who were supposed to care, the ones who were supposed to be racing to the hospital to witness this miracle. My call to Miranda went straight to her crisp, professional voicemail. You've reached Miranda. Leave a message. Miranda, it's Clara. I choked out. I'm in labor. We're heading to the hospital now. I thought, I hoped you'd want to be there. My voice broke on the last word. I tried Chloe's number. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. Zach's phone did the same. My own mother's phone went straight to an automated message. Even Sarah, Leo's sister who lived just 20 minutes away, didn't pick up by 3:30 a.m. I was in a hospital bed, shivering in a flimsy gown that felt designed to maximize vulnerability. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed, casting a harsh, clinical glow on everything Leo had begrudgingly driven me there, and then immediately located the most comfortable-looking chair in the corner of the room and promptly fallen asleep. First baby? Asked Nurse Patricia, a woman in her 50s with the kindest eyes I had ever seen. Yes, I managed to say between contractions, which were now storming in every 5 minutes. Where's your family? Your mom? Sisters? I glanced at Leo's sleeping form and then at my phone, which showed 0 missed calls and 0 new messages. They're busy tonight. Patricia's expression softened with a look of profound understanding. She'd seen this 1,000 times before. I was sure of it. Women laboring in stark, lonely rooms while their supposed support systems failed them. She gave my hand a brief, firm squeeze before checking my progress. 4 centimeters, she announced with a reassuring smile. You're doing great, honey. The hours crawled by with a torturous, mechanical precision. Contractions crashed over me like tidal waves, each one more powerful than the last I breathed. I gripped the cold metal bed rails, and I watched the door, my heart leaping with a desperate, foolish hope every time I heard footsteps in the hallway. Surely someone would come. Surely Leo would wake up and grasp the magnitude of what was happening. Surely my phone would ring with a flood of frantic apologies and promises to be there in 5 minutes. Instead, the silence in the room just stretched on, broken only by the rhythmic, monotonous beeping of the monitors and the sound of Leo's occasional snores. At 6:45 a.m., my water broke in a sudden warm gush that soaked the bed sheets and sent a fresh jolt of panic through my chest. The contractions became relentless, a merciless onslaught of pain that gave me barely 30 seconds of peace between each crushing wave. "Leo," I called out, my voice raw and hoarse from hours of pained, controlled breathing. "Leo, wake up!" He stirred, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "What time is it? The baby's coming," I gasped. "He's really coming. Call your family." He fumbled for his phone, squinting at the bright screen. The game ended at 2 a.m. They're probably all fast asleep. While I was fighting to bring his child into the world, they were all sleeping soundly, and that's when I heard it. Running. Footsteps in the hallway, rapid and determined, getting closer and closer. My heart hammered against my ribs with a surge of desperate hope. Finally, someone had come. The door burst open, and Maya flew into the room like a hurricane, her dark hair plastered to her head from the torrential downpour outside, her jacket dripping puddles onto the sterile linoleum floor. Her eyes were wide with a mixture of worry and exhaustion, like she had driven through the night to get here. "I'm so sorry," she gasped. Rushing to my bedside, I came as soon as I got your message. The traffic was a nightmare, and then I couldn't find parking and... You came, I sobbed, reaching for her hand, the simple fact of her presence a balm on my shattered nerves. You actually came. She squeezed my fingers tight, her solid, grounding presence immediately filling the vast emotional void that had been threatening to swallow me whole for hours. "Of course I came," she said, her voice fierce. "I wouldn't have missed this for the entire world." The next few hours became a blur of agonizing pain, bone-deep exhaustion, and Maya's steady, calming voice, guiding me through each gut-wrenching contraction. She wiped my forehead with cool, damp cloths, held my hand in a vice grip when the pain became unbearable, and argued fiercely with the nurses when they tried to push procedures I wasn't ready for. "She needs more time," Maya insisted when one nurse suggested medication to speed things along. "Let her body do what it needs to do." Leo would occasionally stir, check his phone for notifications, or ask if anything had happened yet, before dozing off again, as if this were just another boring Tuesday afternoon. The chasm between his chilling indifference and Maya's ferocious advocacy grew wider and more profound with each passing hour. At 2:17 p.m., after 14 hours of grueling labor, my son entered the world with a piercing, healthy cry that echoed off the hospital walls. Dr. Evans gently placed him on my chest, this tiny, perfect, miraculous human being, covered in vernix and blood. His eyes squeezed tightly shut as he announced his arrival to anyone who would listen. I looked down at his wrinkled, alien face, his impossibly small fingers, his surprising shock of dark hair, and I felt my heart simultaneously break and heal. He was beautiful. He was healthy. He was mine. But the delivery room, which should have been overflowing with cheers and happy tears and excited phone calls, contained only the medical staff, one sleeping husband, and my best friend, who was crying almost as hard as I was. "What's his name?" Nurse Patricia asked gently. As she prepared the birth certificate, I looked over at Leo, holding on to one last foolish shred of hope that he might want to participate in this one single moment. He glanced up from his phone just long enough to shrug. "Whatever you want." "Noah," I whispered. The name I had been holding in my heart for months. Noah Robert. Even after everything, I gave our son his grandfather's name. "Emergency contact?" Patricia continued. I paused, my gaze sweeping across the nearly empty room. At Leo, who had already gone back to scrolling on his phone. At the door, which remained stubbornly closed to all the family members who couldn't be bothered to witness this miracle. "Just me," I said finally, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tears that were still streaming down my cheeks. As they cleaned Noah and weighed him, I just sat there, counting the silence. No congratulatory calls flooding my phone, no flower deliveries arriving at the door, no excited relatives clamoring to hold the newest member of the family. There was just the quiet, rhythmic beeping of machines and Maya's gentle humming as she helped me navigate the first terrifying, beautiful moments of motherhood. The loneliness I felt in that moment was heavier than any contraction had been, settling deep into my chest, like a physical weight I knew I would carry forever in that silent recovery room. Holding my perfect son while the rest of the world moved on without us, I finally truly understood the meaning of being alone. The soft knock on the door barely registered above the steady, ambient hum of the medical equipment. I was completely lost in studying Noah's tiny, perfect fingernails, marveling at their miniature perfection, when Nurse Patricia pushed the door open with an uncharacteristic hesitation. "Excuse me, honey," she said, her voice carrying a strange, formal tone. I hadn't heard from her before. "I have something for you." She was holding a silver box, about the size of a jewelry case, its polished surface gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. An intricate lock secured the front, and a small brass nameplate engraved with my initials caught my eye. The metal felt cool and heavy in my hands, substantial in a way that immediately signaled its importance. "This came from a law office downtown," Patricia explained, glancing over at Maya with undisguised curiosity. The delivery man was very specific. He said to give it to you only if you were alone during your delivery. My heart stuttered. Alone? He had a list of names, she added, pulling a folded piece of paper from her pocket. He said, if any of these people were here with you, I was supposed to hold on to this until they left. The paper trembled in my free hand as I unfolded it, and there they were, in neat, legal-style printing, the names that had haunted my entire pregnancy: Leo Mitchell, Miranda Mitchell, Chloe Chen, Zachary Ross, Sarah Mitchell. Every single person who should have been here. Every single person who wasn't. "I don't understand," I whispered, my eyes fixed on the box with a growing sense of dread and wonder. "Who sent this?" Patricia shrugged sympathetically. "The law firm of Sterling Croft. That's all I know, sweetie." Maya moved closer to the bed, her gaze locked on the mysterious container. "Should I?" "Stay," I said quickly. "Please stay." The lock was an old-fashioned design requiring a small, delicate key that hung from a thin chain wrapped around the box. My fingers shook as I inserted it, and the mechanism clicked open with a sound that seemed to echo through the quiet room. The lid opened with a soft, expensive-sounding creak, revealing a lining of rich, burgundy velvet. Nestled inside was a thick, cream-colored envelope, sealed with a disc of dark red wax. And on that wax was an imprint I recognized instantly. "Oh my God," I breathed, nearly dropping the box. It was my father's signet ring, the one he had worn every single day of my childhood, the one I had traced with my finger during long car rides, the one that had been buried with him just 6 weeks ago. "What is it, Clara?" Maya asked, her voice barely a whisper. "It's from my dad." The words came out strangled, as if my throat had forgotten how to form sounds. But that's impossible. He's gone. Robert Pierce had died suddenly, a massive heart attack in his sleep, leaving behind what I thought was a straightforward will and a daughter who believed she knew everything about his life. Apparently, I had been very, very wrong. Maya gently took Noah from my arms, settling him into the clear plastic hospital bassinet so I could focus on the envelope. The wax seal cracked under my thumb, releasing the faint, familiar scent of my father's cologne, a warm, woody aroma that made my chest ache with a sudden, sharp pang of longing. The paper inside was thick and heavy, expensive stationery bearing his law firm's letterhead, but the handwriting was unmistakably his, the same careful, deliberate script that had signed every birthday card and school permission slip of my life. "My dearest daughter," it began, and I had to stop and wipe my eyes before I could continue. "If you are reading this letter, then my worst fears have come true. You are holding our son, and yes, I know it's a boy. The technician at your 20-week ultrasound was a client's daughter, and you are alone." I looked up at Maya, who was rocking Noah gently, her eyes full of concern. "How could he have possibly known?" "Keep reading," she urged softly. "I have been watching your husband's family for months now, sweetheart. I have seen how they treat you, how they dismiss your joy, how they make you feel small and unwanted. I hoped I was wrong. I prayed they would prove me wrong when it mattered most." The letter began to blur, as fresh tears fell onto the paper. My father's voice seemed to fill the room, as steady and protective in death as it had been in life. If they failed you, if they couldn't be bothered to show up for the most important day of your life, then they do not deserve what I am about to give you. My hands were shaking uncontrollably as I turned the page, revealing a stack of documents that made my breath catch in my throat. Legal papers, property deeds, stock certificates, all of them bearing my name, Clara Pierce, in bold official print, the lakeside cottage on Maple Street. Remember the big house with the wraparound porch that you loved so much as a child? I bought it 3 years ago. It's currently valued at $1.5 million, and it's yours, free and clear. I nearly dropped the papers. That house had been my dream home, the one I'd pointed out every single time we drove through the wealthy part of town when I was a teenager, telling my dad I'd live there someday. He'd always just smiled and said, "We'll see." The investment in that tech startup, Innovate Solutions. Remember how I used to joke about buying into it just for fun when their stock was cheap? Well, I did. A 15% ownership stake which generates about $75,000 annually in dividends. It is also yours. Maya leaned over my shoulder, her eyes widening in disbelief as she scanned the documents. "Clara, are you seeing this?" "There's more," I whispered, turning to the next page. "The private trust fund I established for you contains an additional $500,000 in various stable investments. Your mother never knew about any of this. I wanted to protect these assets for you and for you alone. I thought about all the sleepless nights I'd spent worrying about money during my pregnancy, the mounting stress of how we would afford childcare and diapers and all the things a baby needs. And all the while, my father had been quietly, secretly building a fortress to secure my future. But here's the most important part, sweetheart. Anyone who abandoned you during your labor, anyone who proved that they cared more about their own convenience than your well-being, is permanently and irrevocably excluded from ever benefiting from these assets." The next page contained a detailed, itemized list. Leo's name was at the top, along with specific ironclad clauses stating that all spousal property rights were voided due to his failure to provide emotional and physical support during childbirth. Miranda, Chloe, Zach, and Sarah were all explicitly listed as excluded beneficiaries, citing their deliberate absence during the grantor's daughter's labor. The letter continued. I had a private investigator confirm that each of these individuals received clear and timely notification of your due date and the onset of your labor. Their absence was a choice, not an oversight. I looked at Maya, who was staring at the legal papers with her mouth slightly agape. He thought of everything. "There's one more thing," I said, noticing another document tucked at the very bottom of the envelope. It was a codicil to his will, dated just 2 weeks before he died. In it, he named Noah as the sole beneficiary of a separate trust fund, containing $250,000 to be accessed when he turned 18. "Your son will never want for anything," the letter continued. "He will have opportunities that no one can ever take away from him. And you, my darling girl, will never again have to depend on people who do not appreciate your worth." The final paragraph was written in a slightly shakier script, as if he had been overcome with emotion while writing it. "I wish I could be there to hold your hand, to tell you how proud I am of you, and to be the first one to hold my grandson. But if I cannot be there in person, at least I can be there in spirit, and in the security that these gifts will provide. You are stronger than you know, braver than you believe, and more loved than they ever made you feel. Your father, always, Robert." I pressed the letter to my chest and sobbed, deep, wrenching, guttural sobs that came from a place of profound grief, overwhelming gratitude, and a love so fierce it hurt. My father had seen what I couldn't or wouldn't allow myself to see. He had protected me in ways I never could have imagined. Noah began to fuss in his bassinet, and Maya quickly brought him back to me. As I held my son against my chest, surrounded by the papers that would change our lives forever, I felt my father's presence as strongly as if he were standing right beside me. He had given me more than money or property. He had given me proof that I mattered, that my pain was valid, and that my worth was never determined by those who had failed to see it. For the first time since my labor began, I wasn't alone. The hospital room door swung open with such theatrical timing, it was as if the universe itself had directed this moment for maximum dramatic impact. Leo strutted in first, his hair still perfectly coiffed, a detail that was jarringly inconsistent with someone who had supposedly been rushing to the hospital. Right behind him was Chloe, clutching a bouquet of cheap-looking grocery store carnations and wearing a smile that looked like it had been rehearsed in a bathroom mirror. "Baby!" Leo exclaimed, his voice booming with a false enthusiasm that echoed unnervingly in the small room. "I am so sorry we're late. You know how insane the traffic gets downtown?" I glanced at the digital clock on the wall. 4:47 p.m. Noah had been born more than 2 hours ago. The completed birth certificate lay on my bedside table, the ink of my signature still drying in the mother section. The father line remained conspicuously, powerfully blank traffic. I repeated, my voice flat and devoid of the warmth he so clearly expected. Chloe rushed forward with her wilting flowers, her heels clicking sharply against the linoleum. "Oh my goodness, congratulations. I feel just awful that we missed everything." I was in the middle of a huge client meeting when I got the message, and then Leo had to finish up some things at the office, and you know how these things go. "No," I said quietly, the single word cutting through her rambling, self-serving excuses. "I don't know how these things go." Maya moved to stand protectively closer to my bed, a lioness guarding her cub. The legal documents were still clutched in her hand. She had been helping me carefully organize them when the door burst open, and now she watched Leo and Chloe with the intense wariness of someone who had personally witnessed 14 hours of unforgivable abandonment. Leo's gaze finally swept the room, landing on the bassinet where Noah was sleeping peacefully. His expression shifted into something that could have been wonder, or maybe possession. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. "There he is," he breathed, stepping forward with his arms outstretched. "Let me hold my son." The word, "my," hit me like a physical blow. After all of it, the missed appointments, the dismissive comments, the hockey game that went into a shootout, he still believed he had the right to claim ownership. I stood up slowly, my body aching and sore from labor, and physically positioned myself between Leo and the bassinet. "No." His arms froze in mid-air. A flicker of confusion crossed his features. "What do you mean, no? He's my baby too, is he?" The question hung in the air like thick smoke, because from where I'm standing, fathers usually show up for the birth. Fathers usually care more about their children than about a hockey game. Chloe shifted uncomfortably, her sad bouquet of flowers looking more pathetic by the second Clara. "Come on, don't be like this. We're here now, that's what matters." "We're here now," I repeated, tasting the sheer absurdity of the words. "You missed the single most important moment of his life, of my life. And you think showing up 2 hours late with gas station flowers makes it okay?" Leo's face hardened, his paper-thin patience wearing thin. "You're being dramatic. I had responsibilities. You can't expect me to just drop everything just because..." "Just because what?" My voice rose, all the pain and fury and frustration of the past 9 months finally erupting. "Just because your son was being born? Just because your wife needed you?" "You're overreacting," he said, using that same familiar dismissive tone that he had used to gaslight me for months. "Women have babies every single day. It's not like you actually needed me here." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Chloe seemed to grasp the gravity of what he had just said. Her face paled, and she took a small, involuntary step backward. Maya stepped forward, her jaw set with a righteous determination. "Actually," she said, her voice clear and strong, "there's something you both need to hear." She held up the legal documents, their official seals and ribbons catching the unforgiving fluorescent light. "These arrived today." From Robert's law firm, Leo's expression immediately shifted from annoyed to suspicious. "What kind of documents?" "The kind that explain exactly what your absence cost you," Maya said, her voice steady and ringing with clarity. She began to read directly from my father's letter, each word dropping into the silent room like a stone into a still pond. "If you are reading this letter, then my worst fears have come true. You are holding our son, and you are alone." Leo and Chloe exchanged a confused glance, uncertainty beginning to creep into their faces. Maya continued, her voice growing stronger and more confident with each devastating revelation. "Anyone who abandoned you during your labor, anyone who proved they cared more about their own convenience than your well-being, is permanently excluded from benefiting from these assets, Chloe whispered, sinking into the vinyl visitor's chair as if her legs could no longer support her. "The lakeside property, worth $1.5 million, Maya read, her voice ringing with the finality of a judge's gavel, a 15% ownership stake in Innovate Solutions, a private trust fund containing $500,000, all exclusively in her name." Leo's face cycled through a rapid series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, dawning, abject horror. "That's impossible. The old man never mentioned any of this. He didn't mention it because he knew," I said, my own voice surprising me with its strength. "He saw all of you for who you really are. He watched you dismiss me, ignore me, and hope that I would just disappear. So he made damn sure that I would never need any of you ever again." Maya turned to the specific exclusion clause, her voice carrying the undeniable weight of legal finality. "Leo Mitchell, spouse, is permanently excluded from all marital property claims related to these assets due to a failure to provide emotional and physical support during childbirth." The color drained completely from Leo's face. "You can't be serious. There's no way that's legally binding." "Oh, but it is," Maya said, holding up the notarized, ribbon-bound documents. "Your father-in-law was one of the best lawyers in the state, remember? He knew exactly how to structure this to be absolutely ironclad." Chloe leaned forward, her voice shaking. "What about the rest of us? Miranda? Me?" "All excluded," I said, watching their carefully constructed world crumble in real time. "Every single person who couldn't be bothered to show up today. Every person who treated my pregnancy like it was an inconvenience. You are all locked out." Leo started pacing the small room, his hands running frantically through his perfect hair. "This is insane. You can't just cut family out like this." "I didn't cut anyone out," I said calmly. "You cut yourselves out. Every missed appointment, every dismissive comment, every single time you made me feel like I was asking for too much by wanting basic human support, you were writing your own exclusion." The implications began to hit them in successive waves. Leo was realizing that his dreams of a comfortable, financially secure future built on my inheritance had just evaporated. Chloe was understanding that her family's long-held expectations of a windfall were gone. The baby they had all secretly hoped would just disappear was now the heir to a fortune they had never even known existed. "The property," Leo stammered. "The company's shares. That's generational wealth." "Yes," I agreed, "for Noah's generation." Chloe made one last desperate appeal. "Surely there's some way to contest this. Family court would—" "Nothing," Maya interrupted, consulting the documents again. "The trust is specifically designed to be bulletproof against any legal challenges. Your father-in-law spent months working with the state's top attorneys to make sure of it." Leo slumped against the wall, the full weight of his choices finally, belatedly, crushing him. For 9 months, he had treated my pregnancy like a burden, my needs like demands, my fears like drama. Now, staring at the legal proof of my father's foresight and protection, he was the one who was the burden. He finally understood the true cost of his indifference. "All you had to do was be here," I said softly. "All any of you had to do was care enough to show up." The room fell silent. The only sounds James's soft, rhythmic breathing and the distant, muffled sounds of hospital life. Leo opened his mouth to speak, then closed it, apparently realizing for the first time that there were no words that could possibly undo the last 14 hours. Chloe just stared at her wilted flowers, a look of dawning comprehension on her face as she understood that her excuses and her apologies were worthless currency in this new reality. For the first time in months, the silence belonged to me. But it wasn't the lonely, desolate quiet of abandonment. It was the powerful, reverberating silence of justice served, of protection activated, and of a father's love reaching beyond the grave to shield his daughter from those who had never deserved her. The game had indeed gone into overtime, but this time I had won. The hospital room had fallen into a thick, uncomfortable stillness. Leo was slumped against the wall, a portrait of defeat, while Chloe clutched her sad, wilted flowers like a life preserver. I was carefully placing the legal documents back into the heavy silver box when Maya's fingers snagged on something. "Wait," she murmured, her brow furrowing as she examined the box's interior. "There's something else in here." Her fingertips traced along the rich burgundy velvet lining, finding a slight, almost imperceptible bulge near the corner. With gentle pressure, she managed to peel back a hidden flap in the fabric, revealing a secret compartment my father had designed with the meticulous precision of someone who understood the critical importance of having an insurance policy. "What is it?" I asked, though a cold knot of dread was already forming in my stomach. Maya extracted a slim, plain white envelope, much smaller than the first, with no official-looking marks or wax seals. It felt heavier, somehow, than the million-dollar documents we had just finished reading. "There's more," she whispered, her voice a mixture of morbid curiosity and genuine apprehension. Leo straightened up against the wall, his attention suddenly razor-sharp. More what? I ignored him, my focus entirely on the envelope in Maya's hands. Something about its stark simplicity made it feel more dangerous than all the legal papers combined. This wasn't about money or property. This was personal. Maya opened it carefully, her hands shaking slightly. Inside were several printed screenshots of text message conversations. The phone numbers had been blacked out, but the names at the top of each thread made my stomach clench. "These are..." I started, then stopped, my throat tightening as I read the first exchange. Miranda's name appeared above a series of messages dated throughout my pregnancy. Her words, preserved in digital amber, laid bare the calculated cruelty I had always sensed, but had never been able to prove. "She's getting way too comfortable with this whole pregnancy thing," one message read. "Someone needs to give her a reality check before she gets completely delusional." The response came from a contact labeled LM, Leo's initials. "What do you suggest?" "Push her. Hard. Make her question everything. If she's going to fall apart, it's better that it happens before the baby actually gets here." Maya's hand trembled as she held the papers. "Clara, how did your father get these?" I thought about the private investigator his letter had mentioned, the one who had confirmed that everyone had received notification of my labor. Apparently, his surveillance had gone much, much deeper than just tracking their attendance. The next screenshot showed Leo's chilling response. "Good thinking. If she breaks before the baby, I keep everything. Clean slate." The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. Each letter crystallized the vague, nagging suspicions I had spent months trying to suppress. There it was, in his own words. The hope that I would crumble, the wish that the pregnancy would destroy me, so that he could emerge from the wreckage with his freedom and my inheritance intact. "No kid, no drama," his next message read. Back to the way things were. Chloe gasped from her chair, her eyes wide as she read over my shoulder. "Leo, you didn't actually." "Shut up," he snapped, his face flushing a deep mottled red with a mixture of embarrassment and rage. "Those messages are taken out of context." "What context?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "What context makes hoping your wife has a complete mental breakdown acceptable?" More screenshots revealed the terrifying scope of their conspiracy. Chloe had contributed her own vicious suggestions. Cancel plans on her last minute, especially when she needs support, make her feel isolated. Zach had added, question every decision she makes, call it concern. Even my own mother appeared in the exchanges, her number above messages that made my chest ache with a fresh, different kind of betrayal. She has always been dramatic. This pregnancy is just making it worse. Don't enable her. The evidence painted a horrifying, undeniable picture of systematic emotional manipulation. It was a coordinated, deliberate effort to undermine my confidence, erode my sanity, and push me toward a breaking point that would have benefited everyone in that room except for me and my unborn child. "You planned this," I said, looking directly at Leo. "All of it. The dismissals, the isolation, the constant questioning of my feelings. You actually sat around and strategized how to break me." He pushed himself off the wall, his hands clenched into tight fists. "You're twisting everything. Those were just frustrations. Venting to family venting?" Maya stood up, her protective instincts flaring. "Leo, this is a blueprint for psychological abuse." The final screenshot was the most damning of all A-group chat that included every single person who should have been at the hospital that day discussing their collective, conscious decision to skip my labor. "Let her do it alone," Miranda had written. "Maybe she'll finally understand she's in over her head." Leo's response, agreed. Natural consequences. Chloe had contributed, "If she can't handle labor without constant support, how's she going to handle motherhood?" Even Sarah, the sister whose children Leo doted on, had chimed in. "Some people just need to learn the hard way." I stared at the irrefutable evidence of their coordinated cruelty, and I felt something fundamental shift inside me, like the grinding of tectonic plates. The gaslighting, the dismissals, the constant subtle undermining. It hadn't been in my head. It had been real. It had been planned. It had been deliberate. "You gambled on me falling apart," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "You all bet that this pregnancy would break me, that labor would destroy me, that I'd finally prove myself unfit to be a mother." Leo's face had gone ghostly pale, his earlier bravado completely evaporating as he realized the full implications of having his conspiracy documented and legalized. "But here's what you didn't count on," I continued, gathering the screenshots with steady, resolute hands. "You didn't count on my father seeing right through all of you. You didn't count on me being stronger than your worst expectations. And you definitely didn't count on your cruelty being rewarded with permanent, legally binding exile from everything you thought you were going to inherit." The room fell silent, the only sound Noah's soft, innocent breathing. Looking at those messages, I realized I didn't need to scream or rage or demand any more explanations. The validation I had been so desperately seeking for months was right here, in black and white. Proof that my pain had been intentional, my isolation manufactured, my fears dismissed by design. But rather than devastating me, the evidence felt like liberation. Every single doubt I had harbored about my own perceptions dissolved in an instant. Every moment I had questioned whether I was being too sensitive or dramatic was reframed as justified, accurate intuition. I stood up slowly, my body still tender and aching from labor, but my spirit feeling stronger and more solid than it had in months. "Maya, help me pack Noah's things." "Where are you going?" Leo demanded, panic finally creeping into his voice. "Somewhere you're not," I replied simply. I gathered the few personal items I'd brought to the hospital, folding them carefully around the silver box, as if it were a priceless treasure. Maya helped me navigate the discharge paperwork while Leo and Chloe sat in stunned, horrified silence, apparently processing the full, cataclysmic scope of their exposure. As I prepared to leave, cradling Noah securely against my chest, I looked back at Leo one last time. He was slouched in the visitor's chair, his phone dangling uselessly from his hand, the very same device he had used to coordinate my emotional destruction. "The house keys," I said, extending my hand. "What?" "My father's property, my name on the deed, your conspiracies documented and witnessed. Hand over the keys to the house that was never really yours." He fumbled in his pocket, his hands shaking as he produced the familiar set of keys. As they dropped into my palm, their cold weight felt like a confirmation of my new reality. I was financially independent, legally protected, and finally, irrevocably free from the people who had never, ever deserved my trust. I walked out of that hospital room without a single backward glance, carrying my son and my strength into a future they would never be able to touch. Maya's guest bedroom became a sanctuary I never knew I so desperately needed. The walls were painted a pale, buttery yellow that caught the morning sunlight just right, filtering it into something gentle and warm that made Noah's skin glow like honey. For 3 months, this small, quiet room became our entire world. It was a world of quiet, middle-of-the-night feedings, of soft lullabies hummed while folding impossibly tiny clothes, of slow morning walks where Noah would stare, wide-eyed and silent, at the pattern of leaves rustling against a blue sky. "He's getting so big," Maya whispered one evening, watching as Noah gripped her finger with a surprisingly strong little fist. "Look at those cheeks." I smiled, a genuine, unforced smile, feeling a sense of deep contentment I had almost forgotten was possible. Here, in this cocoon of unconditional friendship and unwavering protection, I could simply be a mother. There was no judgment, no manipulation, no constant, subtle questioning of my instincts. There was just the pure, unadulterated joy of watching my son discover the world, one new sight and sound at a time. The outside world, however, refused to stay quiet for long. My phone buzzed incessantly with messages I had no intention of reading. Leo's contact name appeared on my screen with such frequency that Maya finally suggested I block his number entirely. But a perverse, morbid part of me wanted to witness his unraveling, to watch from a safe distance as he scrambled to reclaim what he had so carelessly, so cruelly thrown away. His voicemail started out desperately cheerful. "Hey babe, just checking in. Hope you and the little guy are doing well. Call me back when you get a chance." Within a week, the tone had shifted to barely concealed panic. "Clara, this is getting ridiculous. You can't just disappear with my son. We need to talk about this like adults." By the 3rd week, he had devolved into full-blown, pathetic pleading. "I know I messed up, okay? I get it. But this silent treatment isn't helping anyone Noah needs his father." I deleted each message without listening to the end, but Maya would sometimes catch fragments when they played too loudly. She would just shake her head, muttering things about audacity and too little. Too late. Social media became Leo's new battlefield. He started posting carefully curated photos from the early days of our relationship, romantic dinners, vacation snapshots, images that painted him as the devoted, loving partner he had never actually been. The captions grew increasingly desperate. "Missing my beautiful family today. Can't wait to hold my son again, blessed dad life family first." One afternoon, there was a knock at the door. "Let me guess," I said, not looking up from where Noah was attempting tummy time on his playmat cookies and crocodile tears. Maya opened the door just wide enough to be polite. "Can I help you?" "I need to talk to her," Chloe said, her voice thick with emotion. "Please." I brought cookies. "For Noah?" "Well, for when he's older, obviously. I need her to know how sorry I am." "She's not interested in apologies," Maya replied smoothly. "But I'll take the cookies. Noah will appreciate them when he's ready for solid food." Maya, please. I know we messed up, but we're family. Family forgives each other. Family shows up, Maya said simply and gently closed the door. Through the window, I watched Chloe stand on the porch for several long minutes, her shoulders shaking with what might have been sobs. Eventually, she turned and walked back to her car, her heels clicking mournfully against the pavement. "You didn't have to do that," I told Maya later. "Yes, I did," she said firmly. "You're not ready, and she doesn't deserve your energy." Meanwhile, Miranda launched her own damage control campaign throughout their social circle. According to the few mutual friends who still spoke to me, she was spinning an elaborate narrative about my postpartum instability and my dramatic overreaction to normal family dynamics. "She's always been sensitive," Miranda apparently told anyone who would listen. "The pregnancy hormones just made it worse. She'll come around once she realizes she's being unreasonable." But the contents of my father's will had become public knowledge among the extended family, and Miranda's attempts to control the narrative fell flat. People weren't buying her revisionist history when there was legal documentation proving systematic, premeditated abandonment during childbirth. Leo's cousin, Mark, called to check on me directly. "I don't know what they were thinking," he said, his voice full of disbelief. "My wife would have literally murdered me if I'd missed our daughter's birth for a hockey game." These small validations, coming from the most unexpected sources, reminded me that my father's protective instincts had been right. Not everyone was like Leo's family. Not everyone would have abandoned me when I needed them most. As spring turned into summer, my strength returned in gradual waves. The physical recovery from childbirth was nothing compared to the emotional healing that came from being surrounded by genuine, uncomplicated care. Noah thrived in the peaceful, loving environment, his smiles coming earlier and more frequently than any of the baby books had predicted. "I think it's time," I told Maya one bright July morning as I watched Noah giggle at his own reflection in a mirror toy. "Time for what?" "To go home," Maya studied my face carefully. "Are you sure? You can stay here as long as you need, you know that." "I know, and I'm so grateful. But it's my house now, my father's house. I shouldn't let them keep me away from what belongs to me and my son." The decision felt right. In a way that surprised even me, I wasn't running back to them because I had forgiven them, or because I needed them. I was returning because I was ready to claim my space, to stand my ground as the woman I had become. Financially independent, emotionally strong, and completely, unshakably clear about my own worth. The morning of our return, I dressed Noah in an outfit my father would have loved, a tiny, crisp, button-down shirt with little sailboats printed on it. I put on my favorite sundress, the one that always made me feel confident and beautiful, and drove to the house, with Maya following close behind for moral support. Leo's car was in the driveway. Of course it was. He'd probably been monitoring Maya's house, just waiting for any sign of our return. I walked through the front door feeling like I was stepping onto my own land because I was. The deed was in my name. The mortgage had been paid in full by my father's careful planning. Every legal document confirmed my sole ownership. Leo was standing in the living room, his clothes wrinkled as if he'd been sleeping in them, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. His usual easy confidence was completely gone. He opened his mouth to speak, then seemed to think better of it. Words had gotten him into this mess. Maybe he was finally learning their limitations. Chloe appeared from the kitchen, tears already streaming down her face. "Clara, I'm so sorry," she began, but I held up a hand. "I'm not here for apologies," I said calmly. "I'm here because this is my home." The shift in the power dynamic was immediate and unmistakable. Leo, who had spent months dismissing my every need, now hung on my every word. Chloe, who had criticized my readiness for motherhood, now offered to help with anything and everything I needed. "I could make dinner," Leo suggested hesitantly. "Whatever you want." "The laundry needs to be done," Chloe added quickly. "I could take care of that." I looked at them both. These two people who had conspired to break me, now falling over themselves in a desperate attempt to serve me. and I felt nothing but a cool, clear detachment. Their panic was not my responsibility. Their regret was not my burden to ease. "Fine," I said simply, settling into my favorite armchair with Noah nestled on my lap. From that day forward, the house operated under a new set of rules I never had to state because my father's will had already stated them clearly enough. Leo cooked meals and cleaned the kitchen without being asked. Chloe folded laundry and organized closets as if she were seeking absolution through domestic service. Miranda stopped visiting entirely after one incredibly awkward encounter with the new reality. She had swept in with her usual commanding, judgmental presence, only to be met with my complete and total indifference to her opinions. "You can't keep this up forever," she'd said, her voice sharp. "This cold shoulder act isn't sustainable." "I'm not acting," I'd replied, not even looking up from feeding Noah. "This is just who I am now." She left within 10 minutes and hasn't been back since. Now Noah crawls across floors that belong to us and to us alone. He will grow up in this house knowing that he is the heir to his grandfather's boundless love and fierce protection. He will never have to doubt his worth or question whether he deserves to take up space in this world. And me, I don't ask for respect anymore. I carry it with me, a suit of armor my father forged for me from his own wisdom and foresight. The silence that once isolated me now empowers me, a quiet, unshakable strength that speaks far louder than their desperate, hollow attempts at redemption ever could. If this story of justice and empowerment had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when the mysterious silver box revealed her father's protective plan, changing everything in an instant. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. And don't miss out on more incredible stories just like this one. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. End of story.